Today, we're going to talk about one of the most important moments in all of human history. And no, it's not a famous battle or the coronation of some king. It was a quiet revolution, one that completely rewrote the rules for how humans live on this planet. This is the story of the Neolithic Revolution. Just think about this for a second. For hundreds of thousands of years, pretty much all of our time on Earth, our ancestors were nomads. They were constantly on the move, following the seasons, hunting and gathering. Their entire existence was a search for the next meal. And then, in what is basically the blink of an eye in historical terms, everything changed. So, what on earth happened? And this slide, wow, it just lays it all out so clearly. On the one side, you've got Paleolithic life, the old Stone Age. You're always moving, living in tiny groups, and you're totally at the mercy of whatever nature decides to give you that day. You're a food collector. But on the other side, Neolithic life, the new Stone Age. You're settled down, you actually have a surplus of food, populations are growing, and for the very first time, we became food producers. This wasn't just a small shift, it was a fundamental change in our relationship with the entire planet. Okay, so to really get just how huge this was, we got to take a step back and understand what life was like before the farm. You know, life before agriculture was, well, it was precarious. Humanity was completely and utterly dependent on the environment. Your survival for the day meant gathering whatever plants, fruits, and roots you could find, and hopefully successfully hunting some wild animals. You lived in small, mobile groups because you had to follow the food. There were no pantries, no refrigerators. You found food, you ate it. You were just another part of the food chain. You definitely weren't in control of it. So what could possibly be powerful enough to change a way of life that had lasted for millennia? Well, the answer wasn't a human invention. It was a global event. Right around 10,000 BCE, the last ice age, what we call the Pleistocene, finally came to an end. The massive glaciers started to melt and retreat, and the world entered a totally new phase, the Holocene. And this wasn't just things getting a little bit warmer. Oh no, this was a complete climatic overhaul. The entire planet became warmer, wetter. It was a different world. This great thaw completely reshuffled the ecological deck of cards. Forests spread where there used to be ice, new types of grasses popped up, and animal herds moved to new territories. For the hunter-gatherers who had absolutely perfected survival in that cold, Ice Age world, this was a moment of both crisis and incredible opportunity. The old rulebook? Totally thrown out the window. And it's right here, in this brand new, warmer world, that humanity developed a radical new strategy for survival, one that would define a whole new era. The name itself, Neolithic, kind of gives us a clue. It was coined way back in 1865 by Sir John Lubbock, and it literally just means New Stone Age. He was looking at the technology. People were making these new, more refined, polished stone tools. You know, a clear upgrade from the rougher, chipped tools of the old Stone Age. But as this brilliant archaeologist V. Gordon Childe argued in the 1940s, the tools were just a symptom of something much, much bigger. He was the one who called it the Neolithic Revolution. He said, look, the polished axes are nice, but that's not the real story. The real revolution was the switch from a food-gathering economy to a food-producing one. And yeah, this really gets to the heart of it. The Neolithic Revolution is the term we use for this absolutely monumental shift, the change from a wandering life of hunting and gathering to a settled life based on farming. This is the moment we started to truly shape the world around us instead of just living in it. So this new way of life was really made possible by a whole new set of tools and ideas that all work together. First, you've got agriculture, the deliberate planting and harvesting of crops. Then domestication, taming animals for food or to help with work. Of course, you have those new polished tools to help clear land. And once you have a stable food source, you get permanent settlements, the world's first villages. And hey, with all that extra grain, what do you do with it? You've got to store it somewhere, right? Boom, pottery is invented. See how each piece of this puzzle supports the others? So we know what happened, and we have a pretty good idea of when it happened. But that leaves the biggest and maybe the most interesting question of all. Why? Why did this happen? And let me tell you, this is one of the great debates in archaeology. I mean, really think about it. Hunting and gathering was a super successful strategy for an incredibly long time. And farming, it's really hard work. So why make the switch? What was the spark that lit the fuse on this global revolution? Well, archaeologists have a few very compelling theories. Okay, so this slide basically lays out the three main contenders in this big debate. You have V. Gordon Childe, who pointed the finger at climate change. Then there's Robert Braidwood, who argued it was more about cultural development. And finally, Louis Binford, who suggested the real driver was a growing population. Let's dig into each one.
Childe's oasis theory is the classic climate-driven idea. He pictured a world getting hotter and drier after the Ice Age, especially in places like the Near East. This change, he argued, forced humans, plants, and animals to cluster together around the few remaining water sources, the oases. And with everyone stuck in the same place, it was only natural that humans started to experiment with managing and controlling the plants and animals around them.
But Robert Braidwood wasn't so sure. He went out and excavated in the hilly areas of the Fertile Crescent, places that weren't drying out, but were actually full of the wild ancestors of things like wheat, barley, sheep, and goats. His theory is that there wasn't some sudden crisis. Instead, after thousands of years of just watching and learning, humans had finally built up enough knowledge about their environment that farming became a natural, gradual next step. The culture was simply ready for it. And then Louis Binford came along with a totally different angle. He said, forget the climate, forget the culture, the real driver was us. He argued that as hunter-gatherer populations slowly grew, they started to put a real strain on the natural resources. There were just too many mouths to feed the old-fashioned way. This pressure, he said, forced people to find a way to squeeze more food out of the land. Farming wasn't a brilliant choice. It was a necessity.
Now, regardless of which theory you think is right, and honestly, the truth is probably a mix of all three, the consequences are just undeniable. This revolution built the very foundation of the world we're all living in today.
You can see the incredible chain reaction right here. It's like a series of dominoes. The first one to fall, agriculture, which created a food surplus for the first time in human history. A steady food supply means you can support more people, and they can stay in one place. And hey, when not everybody has to spend all day looking for food, some people can become potters, or builders, or weavers. This is called craft specialization. And as these villages got bigger and more organized, they turned into the world's very first towns and cities.
When you really boil it down, everything that we think of as civilization, cities, writing, governments, states, you name it, it was all made possible by the food and the population boom that came from farming. This one single shift, which started in just a few spots around the globe, laid the groundwork for absolutely everything that followed, from the first kingdoms to the world you see right outside your window.
And that brings us to our final thought here. The revolution that gave us food security, cities, and civilization also brought us a whole new host of challenges. Things like social inequality, new diseases, and for most people, a lot more backbreaking labor. It set us on a completely new path, and there was no turning back. It gave us our world, but it's always worth asking, isn't it? What did we lose to get here?